How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt, and Mihir Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast. It's game time, your weekly sports wrap. Chalo, Happy New Year वगैरह सब हो गया. It's back to business, and like we discussed in the last episode of 2020, the calendar turning to 2021 doesn't magically resolve all our problems. It doesn't for sure take away the pandemic shadow over the sporting world. If anything, starting के कुछ दिन में ही the bubbles all over have started showing fractures. So after a brief look at the future of Olympics, the shifting sporting landscape in our first show of the year, we are back to talking about the COVID-19 and bubbles and everything. Mir, take us through the latest.
I assume we weren't the only ones assuming that things would return to normal once the year changes. Looks like a lot of sports persons too were believing that the way all the bubble... I can't believe, first of all, you also missed the opportunity to use the lame pun of the bubble bursting. Bubble fracture तूने बोल दिया. But
I know.
but it's weird, right? Whatever happened in Melbourne with the cricket team, and I mean, now we saw this last week about Saina Nehwal also raising some issues about the bubble in Bangkok. It is a very important thing for, I think, everyone, and most importantly, the sports persons, I think, to remember now that the pandemic is still raging and bubble will continue to exist for a very foreseeable future, at least for a major part of this year. Melbourne wala incident, I don't know what your take on it is, Gaurav, but I mean, we understand that it has been a very tough period for all these cricketers to live in a bubble for 5-6 months now, for some even more than that. But still no excuse to kind of step out of it and mingle with people outside the bubble.
Absolutely. I think मेरा सबसे पहला immediate जो take था वो था कि यार जो लोग फैन को गाली देने लग गए थे कि तूने क्यों ये फोटोज डाला, और मतलब क्या, एक तो ये कि तू बिल उन्हें क्यों नहीं पे करने दिया, और मतलब जो भी बकवास है. बट इवेंचुअली इट केम डाउन टू कि यार यू कॉज्ड ऑल दिस फुरोर. ये सब कुछ जो भी हुआ, अगर तुम नहीं डालते तो ये सब नहीं होता, सिचुएशन अराइज नहीं होता. सो एसेंशियली व्हाट हैपेंड, इफ यू गाइज आरंट अवेयर, कि सम किड ऑन ट्विटर ही पोस्टेड फोटोज एंड अ वेरी एंटरटेनिंग थ्रेड कि कैसा पूरा अपने 5-6 क्रिकेटर्स वहाँ एक रेस्टोरेंट में बैठे थे. उसके बाद में इस बंदे ने उन्हें बिल भी दिया, उनका पूरा बिल का बकायदा फोटो भी उसने दिखाया, जिसमें कुछ ऑब्जेक्शनेबल आइटम्स भी थे जो मिहिर वसावड़ा तो बिल्कुल नहीं खाता. बट उसकी वजह से हुआ क्या कि essentially because they were allowed to step out of the hotel, according to the protocol, they were also allowed to dine out as long as they were dining out outdoors. ये inside का फोटो था, तो बहुत सारा सिचुएशन इसकी वजह से बड़ा हो गया. At the larger point, Mihir, that you bring up, let's get into Saina Nehwal first in this badminton, because essentially the first major non-cricketing sport जो कि resume हो रहा है इंडिया में elite level पे. It was a story written by Shivani Nayak, came out Wednesday, Jan 6th. And मेरे उसमें interesting part ये है कि it juxtaposes what Saina Nehwal is saying, how she is feeling, with the likes of Carolina Marin and Tai Tzu Ying, badminton superstars, who are getting on with it. ठीक है, बॉटल से उन्होंने बॉटल का क्रेट से वो लोग वेट्स बना रहे हैं, वहाँ पे रूम में वो अपना पूरा फिटनेस रेजिमेंट जारी रखा हुआ है, और दूसरी तरफ कंप्लेंट्स हैं कि भाई ये नहीं है वो नहीं है, जो कि जायज़ भी हो सकती है, नहीं भी हो सकती. बट इट्स थोड़ा सा jarring because the situation is the same for everybody, no matter what the country or whatever nationality, right?
Yeah, and in this case, Gaurav, the situation wasn't even what Saina Nehwal has said. So to sum it up, the whole issue became an issue when Saina Nehwal with other Indian badminton players reached Bangkok for the 3 major events that will be held in Thailand starting next week. Now, obviously, like it has become a norm nowadays, before you start training outdoors and you step out of your hotel, there is a period which you have to spend in quarantine. And during that quarantine period, you're not allowed to meet anyone. Now, Saina Nehwal, she first put up a selfie of her on Twitter, of her in the room and just chilling over there. And then her next tweet is basically just lashing out at the World Badminton Federation, saying that, you're not allowing us to even go near our physios and trainers. So how will we remain fit this entire duration? And this is a stupid bubble rule and blah, blah, blah. Now, what happened, and this is something that Shivani pointed out in her copy, is that Saina had completely misread the rules. And that was, in a way, very embarrassing, because what she said about the physios and trainers was just for the first 3 days of the quarantine. After that, you could start training with your contingent. So it was a total non-issue over there, which kind of was because Saina had misread the rules. And even otherwise, I think, Gaurav, for people to complain right now about the rules inside a bubble, even if they're strict, they ought to be a bit considerate, unless कि एकदम ही extreme rules है, which I don't think कहीं पर भी हो रहा है ऐसा. But you need to be a bit considerate on the host country as well. They are taking risks as well to invite people from all over the world and play a tournament at a time when everything is shut, even now. And we are headed to lockdowns in many countries.
Especially when you're coming after itna lamba layoff, when you're losing days, weeks, months, years of your prime to this pandemic, there's a certain sense of accountability and responsibility. ये काफी ज्यादा मैंने बजरंग के साथ में नोटिस किया था when I had a chat with Bajrang Punya, who is in USA for his training camp. He basically said कि यार मैं अगर चलो घूमने चला जाऊं या कहीं पे भी, because it was snowing in Michigan when I was speaking to him, and I could hear थोड़ा सा चहलकदमी पीछे, because newlywed and wife Sangeeta Fogart, also a wrestler, is there. And I just asked him in jest कि have you been out and about, आपने देखा मिशिगन थोड़ा भी स्नो का ये समय. He basically said कि यार अगर मैं ये सब करूंगा तो कल को अगर पता चला ट्रेनिंग सेंटर में कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ गया, और इफ समबडी गेट्स क्वारंटीन्ड एंड उसकी वजह से ट्रेनिंग सेंटर यहाँ पे बंद करना पड़ गया, तो इट्स नॉट जस्ट मी हु लूजेस लॉट ऑफ वैल्यूएबल टाइम, बट जो लोग बेचारे मिशिगन यूनिवर्सिटी के स्टूडेंट्स यहाँ पे हैं, जो रेगुलर्स हैं वहाँ पे, दे विल ऑल्सो गेट हैम्पर्ड. सो आई थिंक दैट सेंस ऑफ अकाउंटेबिलिटी और रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी की जरूरत है. बॉक्सर्स showed a lot of it when they were in Cologne. वहां पे भी एक दो बारी some situations arose, but they're competing, training inside a bubble, following all the strict protocols, and now they're back home and again quarantining. So I don't know, we can't say across the board Indian sportsmen के साथ ये issue रहा है, but generally अभी इन cases में recently तो देखने को मिल रहा है. How are situations in other sports, Mihir, say for example the hockey team?
The women's hockey team is in Buenos Aires right now, and they'll be playing a combination of matches with the junior team, the junior Argentina women's team, as well as the senior team in the second half of this month. And up tak, they've just landed a couple of days ago, so they're quarantining, no issues over there so far. But this point that you raised, Gaurav, about Indian players and them generally being reluctant to accept rules, some of them at least, that was visible also in India. I mean, throughout that first wave of infections that was spreading across the country, there were athletes who were at National Institute of Sport in Patiala, at Sports Authority of India Center in Bangalore. And a lot of these athletes, especially the ones in Patiala, they just refused to accept the situation outside. And they wanted some freedom of movement. They wanted to step out of the bubble and come back in without, I don't know if they did not understand the whole seriousness of the situation, or was it just frustration after living inside one center for 3-4 months. But I don't know if it's harsh to say that it's only the Indian athletes who are behaving this way, because we actually haven't followed how the other countries are doing on this front. But yeah, I think the athletes can do a bit better, and in terms of showing cooperation and understanding.
Yeah, so let's again go back to the main event, jo kicked off the 2021, this fan spotting group of Indian cricketers, Rohit Sharma, Navdeep Saini, Rishabh Pant, Shubman Gill. थोड़ा सा ओवर एक्साइटमेंट में वो ये भी कह रहा है कि ऋषभ पंत ने तो भाई हक भी कर दिया आके कि नहीं यार आपने ये क्या, बिल्कुल प्रॉपर दिल्ली टाइप में, बट देन ही रिट्रैक्टेड दोस कमेंट्स कि नहीं यार हक तो नहीं किया, मैं थोड़ा एक्साइटमेंट में ज्यादा बोल गया. बट दैट again caused a lot of problems. मिहिर, कम से कम इनसाइडर्स से जितना सुनने में आता है कि यार then there was a situation कि Sydney and Brisbane, the last two stops of this India Australia series, जो लास्ट दो मैचेस जहाँ पे वेन्यूज में होने थे, they were going to be tighter, stricter regulations, protocols where you won't be able to step out of your hotel. In fact, ब्रिस्बेन में जो गाबा टेस्ट होगा, फोर्थ टेस्ट में, वहां पे तो पहले ये कंसिडर किया जा रहा था कि आपको होटल रूम से भी बाहर नहीं निकलने दिया जाएगा, बट देन द क्वींसलैंड गवर्नमेंट दे इशूड कि चलो we'll have bubbles inside the hotel so that the players can mingle amongst themselves when they are not playing or training at the stadiums.
It's definitely a smarter thing to do. I mean, it doesn't make sense कि after spending 2 months in a bubble, in the last leg of it, you restrict players, confine players only to their rooms. I think that would have been a bit unfair. But this is common sense to get both teams in same hotel and then allow them to roam around inside the premises over there. Look, again, इसमें right, wrong वाला situation तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं है, because you need to understand both mindsets. From the organizer's point of view, they want to ensure कि the matches don't become a reason for spreading the infection, which was a concern with the Boxing Day test in Melbourne, jahan par one person who attended the match had tested positive, and the local authorities are now investigating if the Boxing Day test, the Melbourne cricket ground, is a hotspot. So you don't want a situation like that from an organizer's point of view. And from a player's point of view, you don't want restrictions to be enforced on you. You want some amount of freedom, especially when you've lived in a bubble-like situation for 6-7 months. तो दोनों साइड से compromises जरूरी है, but I think in this case more compromise has to come from the player's point of view.
Absolutely. We'll get into why these compromises are necessary, और क्यों events पे पंगा हो रहा है, why these bubbles are being क्या बोलूं, burst बोलूं या fracture बोलूं. I know it's either cliche or nonsensical because a bubble can't get fractures, but I'll choose nonsense again कि यार बहुत दरारें पड़ गई हैं इस bubble में. But उस सबसे पहले एक छोटा सा break.
If you're someone who likes to be updated about the news, then you know how important it can be not only to find a trustworthy source, but also a place that can give you the right context and helps you see the bigger picture. And there is perhaps no other place that does this better than Indian Express's Explained section. It has everything you need to know to understand the news better. Explained keeps you on top of the ever-changing news cycle and helps you see the larger trends that you wouldn't ordinarily by just following the headlines. You can log on to indianexpress.com/explained, access their coverage 24/7, and find in-depth analysis by the right experts. Explained by Indian Express, where news that matters is explained by experts who know the subject. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. So this week the Premier League revealed a record number of positive COVID-19 tests results. 40 लोग positive पाए गए हैं, that's players and staff, during 2 rounds of testing between December 28th and January 3rd. और 2,295 टेस्ट हुए थे, 2295, and this after a testing period which had only 20 positive results. तो डबल ही हो गया है. मिहिर, सिचुएशंस अभी भी कंट्रोल में होना बहुत मुश्किल है, क्योंकि फुटबॉल वाज बीइंग सीन एज वन ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स. एनबीए तो चलो एक अपने डिज्नी वर्ल्ड में करा दिया है जो भी है, बट फुटबॉल वाज बीइंग सीन एज दिस ग्रेट ट्रायम्फ, इवन दो पॉजिटिव केसेस वर ऑलवेज देयर. ऐसा कभी नहीं होता कि नहीं हो रहा था, बट जस्ट द शेयर फैक्ट कि elite club competition was back on, this jolts that narrative thoda sa na.
Absolutely, I mean mainly because again इसमें ये साल ऐसा है ना, क्योंकि लास्ट ईयर के इवेंट्स हैव बीन ब्रॉट फॉरवर्ड दिस टाइम, एंड अगर जो एक इवेंट में कुछ गड़बड़ होती है, then it can potentially have a domino effect on the others. So इसमें कंसर्न ये है कि प्रीमियर लीग which has already postponed a couple of matches here and there, they had planned their calendar in such a way that the league would have gotten over just, I think, 17 or 18 days before the European Championships. Now, if they are forced to reschedule more matches or even temporarily suspend the league, it would mean that जो उनका targeted end of the season, which is around May 23, if I'm not wrong, वो affect होगा. And if the league does not end on May 23, then that severely jeopardizes either the European Championships, which are slated to begin on June 11th, or other competitions. Like they might, cut short the FA Cup, or there might be a compromise somewhere in some other way. And this, we are talking only about England. The way this new variant is behaving, we don't know कि उसमें आगे और कितने कंट्रीज में और कैसे इम्पैक्ट हो सकता है ये. So that is one thing which is very intriguing about football. And again, we should remember that why Premier League matters over here is because a lot of players who will play in the European Championships are currently playing in the Premier League. And at the same time, along with the European Championships, there is also the Copa America. And a lot of players who will play in Copa America are also in the Premier League.
Yeah, so dire situation. ये तो सीजन के बीच में हो रहा है, अपना नॉन एग्जिस्टेंट क्रिसमस ब्रेक के बाद में. टेनिस में सीजन स्टार्टिंग में ही काफ़ी दिक्कतें हो रही हैं. द ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन ट्यून अप इवेंट्स यूज्ड टू बी हेल्ड इन ऑकलैंड, शेंज़न, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भी काफ़ी जगह है, दे नॉट टेकिंग प्लेस. WTA का अबू धाबी में हो रहा है. द ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन क्वालिफाइंग इज टेकिंग प्लेस इन दुबई from January 10th to January 13th. Australian Open itself will kick off from the 8th of February to 21st February, but कुछ guarantee नहीं है भाई साहब. Australian Open तो has been such a it's a beat in itself यार Mihir. It's not even tennis. You wake up, you Google Australian Open current news. Craig Tilley कुछ बोलते हैं जो टूर्नामेंट ऑर्गेनाइजर हैं. जब ये सब बिल्कुल जो कहते हैं कि अपना चरम सीमा पे था, क्या बढ़िया हिंदी निकल रही है आज मेरी नए साल में, ये एकदम उफान पे था जब ये पैंडेमिक. तब क्रेग टिली वाज द गाय हु पुट हिज फुट डाउन एंड सेड कि नहीं यार, सेरेना विलियम्स और रॉजर फेडरर सब आएंगे ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन में, ऑलरेडी बुक्ड है, आप लोग तैयारी कर लीजिए. एंड रॉजर फेडरर ऑफ कोर्स हैज पुल्ड आउट एंड द ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन इज इन डायर स्ट्रेट्स. even the accommodation, because the news that came out कि यार जिस होटल में ये लोग ठहरा रहे थे, there would have been proper quarantining, all these strict protocols. वहाँ पे जो residents of quote unquote apartments at those hotels, they said कि हमसे तो पूछा ही नहीं यार ये सब हो रहा है, तो we're not comfortable with this. And मतलब ये सारे दुनिया भर के players हम लोगों के साथ में रहे, हम लोग we're not comfortable with that. तो suddenly they had to pull out from that hotel. They are looking at accommodation. The women's events especially बहुत ज़्यादा screwed up हो गया, जो starting calendar ही है, यहाँ से वहाँ. And there's still people like Sam Querrey, जो कि when we talk of accountability and responsibility, this great storyline broke out sometime last year where Sam Querrey just disappeared. He fled Russia with a private jet with his wife and a 7-month-old child. सुबह में, कभी रात में, सुबह में वो बैकडोर से पूरा एस्पियोनाज थ्रिलर की तरह रशिया से भाग गया, बिकॉज वहाँ पे क्वारंटीनिंग था और वहाँ पे प्रॉपर टेस्टिंग था और उन लोगों को डर था कि दे माइट टेस्ट पॉजिटिव एंड दे माइट बी हेल्ड इन रशिया फॉर सम टाइम. उसके बाद में कई महीनों तक पता ही नहीं चला सैम क्वेरी कहाँ गायब हैं. एंड टर्न्स आउट ही वाज इन लंदन. अभी $20,000 का फाइन लगा एटीपी ने, विच साउंड्स वेरी लीनियंट, बट दिस वाज सच अ हू डन इट कि यार कहाँ गया और कैसे गायब हो गया. देयर आर दोज पीपल एंड लाइक मिहिर सेड कि माइंडसेट अगर आप समझना चाहें, आप समझ सकते हैं कि क्यों दे माइट बी अ लिटिल एप्रीहेंसिव कि यार रशिया में विल बी हेल्ड थोड़े टाइम के लिए ये सब. बट अगेन इट कम्स डाउन टू अकाउंटेबिलिटी एंड इट कम्स डाउन टू प्लेइंग बाय द रूल्स. सो इवेंचुअली ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन भी मेरे बहुत डाइसी लग रहा है क्या होगा.
I think ऑस्ट्रेलियन ओपन थोड़ा सा अनफॉर्चुनेट टाइमिंग पर भी है, बिकॉज इवन दो वैक्सीन्स आर अवेलेबल, इतना जल्दी तो इम्पैक्ट वैक्सीन्स का नहीं हुआ. एंड एज वी आर सीइंग कि द रोल आउट is also a tough challenge. I think March, Gaurav, will be a very crucial month क्योंकि काफी clarity तब तक आ जाएगी. I was talking to a few people जो Olympics से related है and they are of the suggestion कि March will be the month जहाँ पर there will be a clarity कि Olympics होगा तो किस shape में होगा, how many people will be allowed inside the stadium, what will be the protocol for athletes. And उसमें simple logic भी है because the IOC, they had rescheduled the Olympics last year in March as well. So that is seen as a cutoff point if you want to cancel the games or give it a different form and shape. So Olympics का हमें मार्च में एक अंदाजा लग जाएगा and एक ये भी आइडिया आ जाएगा कि मार्च में there is a shooting world cup, the year's first shooting world cup for rifle and pistol and shotgun events combined, जो न्यू दिल्ली में होना है. And if by that time the travel restrictions are not lifted and you don't see the shooters from all usual countries able to make it in India, then that would mean that situation still hasn't normalized and it could have a ripple down effect on the other events and by consequence also the Olympics. The shooting World Cup से एक अंदाजा मिल जाएगा कि where the other events as far as Olympics are concerned उसका क्या situation, also for the qualifying of the Olympics, which is a bigger task and bigger challenge right now. Also हमें एक idea आ जाएगा कि IPL का क्या होगा, whether it will be held in India or whether they'll go to Dubai. There are multiple options कि आप बॉम्बे में सारे मैचेस करवा लो because Bombay has 4 good stadiums, Brabourne, Wankhede, DY Patil and the Bandra Kurla Complex Stadium. And Zarot Padite, have got the 5th venue in Pune, which is also, I mean, halfway between Bombay and Pune. So I think by March, काफी clarity मिल जाएगी कि second half of the year कैसा रहेगा.
How is Japan looking though, Mihir? How is situation in Tokyo? Because वहाँ पे तो जैसे also we were discussing once off the air कि उधर थोड़ा सा स्पाइक होते ही में दे रन हेल्टर स्केल्टर ना, काफी ज्यादा नर्वसनेस एंड अंडरस्टैंडेबली सो. बट व्हाट इज द सिचुएशन लाइक अभी?
So on the day we are recording this, which is Jan 6th, Japan has recorded most number of cases in terms of the daily spike. Now, again, अगर जो हम देखें तो from an overall point of view, it might not look that big the number. So if you just look at it, Tokyo की अगर हम बात करें तो they had 1,591 cases on Wednesday, which might not look that much in cities like Mumbai, जहाँ पर it was double the number, in Delhi as well, or even London and other big cities. But like you said, Japan have been largely not that affected compared to other countries. So a number like this has kind of stirred them up thoda sa. And there is this call to impose a state of emergency in Tokyo. Now, again, if that happens, then there will be whole speculation about the future of the Olympics and all those things. So situation काफी strange है अभी वहाँ पर, because obviously there are less than 200 days to go. But on the flip side, you can also say that there are still around 200 days to go for the Olympics, if you understand what I mean. ज़्यादा भी हो सकते हैं 200 days to expect कि vaccine की effect will be seen by the time July arrives. Or you can also say from last year experience कि 200 दिन में कुछ नहीं होने वाला. So Tokyo Olympics is at a very precarious position and it will be, I think, playing out like this for the entire year कि एक question mark तो hang होते ही रहेगा on the Olympics.
Yeah, the reason I'm interested in Tokyo is because January 4th and 5th they ran their New Japan Pro Wrestling का Wrestle Kingdom event. It's a 2-night event. It's Japan's equivalent of WrestleMania at the Tokyo Dome, and it's a tradition दशकों से होता आ रहा है, and it's a 50,000 seater stadium and there was a limit of 20,000. I got some clips of that. Obviously there were the same protocols that have been applied in Japanese sports काफी टाइम से बेसबॉल वगैरह में, कि मास्क वगैरह पहले से टेस्टिंग होगी, एड्रेस वगैरह सब कुछ देना है, बट ऑल्सो यू कैन ओनली क्लैप, you can't chant, you can't woo, or you can't boo, or you can't do anything. So a very strange experience. वो मैं जितना देख पाया खैर उतना, but yeah, perhaps who knows कि ये लास्ट अच्छा प्रॉपर इवेंट था 20,000 लोगों के साथ में, if situation keeps डिटीरियोरेटिंग थोड़ा सा. लेट्स ब्रिंग इन शशांक. अब ये मैं तो नहीं कह सकता और ना मैं सोचता हूँ मिहिर ऐसा बोलेगा, बट तुम्हारे मुंह से कहलवा सकते हैं, यू डोंट हैव एनी स्टेक इन इट. क्या तुम्हें क्या लगता है यार, इंडियन स्पोर्ट्समैन क्या रूल्स नहीं मानना चाहते क्या, अपनी मर्जी के करते हैं हमेशा?
Out of maybe थोड़ा बहुत तो है. I think sports out of, I mean, if I compare sports as compared to, actually नहीं, हमारे politicians भी अपनी मर्जी के करते हैं. हम sports personalities के पीछे क्यों पड़े? Now that I think of it, yeah, politicians भी, yeah, they follow their own rules, bend their own rules, make their own rules. So it's a different kind of democracy.
क्या प्रोफेशनल इसने पिवट मारा है एक्सप्रेस स्पोर्ट्स गेम टाइम से 3 थिंग्स की तरफ में, इसने जबरदस्त प्लग किया है. अब कुछ नहीं है अच्छा कहने को, बड़ा कुछ ओवर आर्चिंग जो यूजुअल तेरा स्टेपल है, तो मतलब पॉलिटिक्स की तरफ ले जाओ, जहाँ पे हम दोनों भी थोड़ा चुप ही बैठेंगे. बट
इनफैक्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट पॉलिटिक्स, यू नो, आई रिमेम्बर अ टाइम जब हम मतलब स्टार्टिंग में when the podcast started, it was a running gag that we would mention Virat Kohli all the time.
Yeah.
Like every episode there'll be one mention of Virat Kohli. And today when Virat Kohli, like आज का Wednesday के पेपर में Virat Kohli's name is on the front page, we didn't mention him on the podcast.
You just have mentioned it, by the way.
see, that was the plan all along.
That was the plan all along. Exactly.
The real Virat Kohli was the friends we made along the way, but I'm guessing Virat Kohli का जो बढ़िया news था which came out, I'm guessing it'll get featured in the 3 things. It should at least. मैं अपना भी थोड़ा यहाँ पे pull लगा रहा हूँ, but
yeah, it will on Thursday's episode.
Yeah, so I can't even say look forward to that because ये Saturday आता है. This podcast is off the rails. अगर आपने मिस कर दिया पीछे जाओ. कुछ यहाँ पे फॉर्मेट सही नहीं होता, कुछ हम लोग कोई कंटिन्यूटी नहीं है. It's a random stream of consciousness. But yeah, it's we're trying to have fun with the news and the situation. But like हम तीनों ही पहले कह चुके हैं, it's still very sobering. अभी वो न्यू ईयर्स वगैरह का नहीं है यार, उतना यूफोरिया भी नहीं है because we are still covered with this sort of news और ये bubbles वगैरह का जितना भी है. तो all we have is hope कि हो सकता है चीजें थोड़ा ठीक हो. Mihir, please bring this podcast back on track और कुछ बोल.
Bubble continue रहेगा.
That's thanks for your input.
He said it. Mihir said it like अंधेरा कायम रहेगा.
अरे नहीं, मतलब इसमें यार हम क्या on track लाएंगे अब यार, मतलब see, and the only hopeful thing, you know, actually is, Gaurav, one thing I'm really looking forward to is starting Monday there will be really top class badminton action. I mean, a week after that, you'll have really nice competitive hockey matches between India and Argentina's women's team. February onwards there will be Australian Open and more tennis matches. So the good thing is that you'll see a lot more sport returning, Abhi. Just that it will still be in a very different environment and without fans. So that is something that I think we are all used to by now. I am really looking forward to watching badminton, hockey, tennis and all these different sports.
Absolutely. Let's see what the future holds. But कोई भी ये bubble कायम रहेगा और फिर मेरा cackles of laughter साथ में, it just sounds very bad and very pessimistic. But yeah, on that note, guys, stay tuned to Game Time. More importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Joshua Thomas and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.
Then you'll also...
Sorry to interrupt me. This shooting World Cup will take place at the Karni Singh shooting range, na?
Yeah, at the Karni Singh shooting range in Delhi.
Do you know, एक बिल्कुल ही identical एक उसके सामने एक shooting range बनाने का plan था. It was supposed to be called Bharni Singh shooting range because जैसी करनी वैसी भरनी.
Oh God. ये edit हो सकता है, शशांक?
So sorry. ये प्लीज कर देना एडिट, आई एम सो सॉरी, बट या
शशांक, ये प्लीज रखना।
सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट, मीर प्लीज कंटिन्यू।
नहीं, जैसी करनी वैसी भरनी। मैं इतने साल गंदे जोक्स मारते रहा तो वेल, मुझे कभी
ओह या
Yeah.
Yeah.
So